Good morning. It is Tuesday, June 21st, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. That makes it the summer solstice, the longest day we have of the year. So just to brighten everybody's day, just to remind you, from here on in, the days are only going to get shorter, and we're already working our way back towards winter again. Welcome to living in a northern country. On the bright side, the mosquitoes will all be gone in a few months. So this is the Western Standard's daily live show. We cover issues, we interview guests, and I rant and get things off my chest. As well, being live, we have a comment scroll. Take advantage of it, guys, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're at out there. I noticed even LinkedIn comments come through for those who are watching on there. We like it to be interactive. That's the point of going live. You know, live has all sorts of challenges, but the great thing is seeing people there, responding directly to the show and what's going on. And you can also have interactions with each other, chat with each other, throw questions towards me, the guests. I don't necessarily get to them all, but I see them all. And it just keeps things interesting and moving along. So good to see you, Brian and Deidre and the rest coming in out there. Okay, so today for guests, I do have the Western Standard's Reid Small. He's our BC reporter, and he covers a lot of stuff out there. He's going to give us an update on all things BC happening out there on the wet coast. And Colin Craig, he's been on before. He's of 2nd Street. And they put out a great thing that I think it was through a FOIP request, but they found out that municipal politicians all across Canada, even though they're always telling us to ride bikes, take transit, all that, well, they all get free parking passes. In fact, a lot of municipal employees do as well. And he's also been doing his Survivors of Socialism series. So we get to talk to him, get an update, and see how those things are going as well. For those who were, listening to the show yesterday, I announced I was going to have another UCP leadership candidate, Rajan Sani, on today. Apparently, there was some confusion in the communication, and she's not going to be able to make it onto the show today. I can't get details because their campaign team is apparently incapable of responding to emails in anything less than 2 hours. So, as much as I'd like to share what her leadership campaign is about, all I could share is their communication sucks. Perhaps we shall reschedule her at another time. All right, so the couple of observances we have for today here is, I think we always get the odd ones. It's National Dog Party Day. Don't ever want to forget that one. Your dogs, my dogs, they're a pain in the butt. They act up. Every day is a party day for them. But either way, today is the day where it is the formal observance. National Dog Party Day. I don't know, put little hats on, get them some treats, have some fun, throw the ball an extra couple times for those dogs. They deserve it, even if they can be a pain in the butt at times. It's also the National Day of the Gong. I'm not sure. We do have a gong here in the office. We bang it on special occasions here, big sales, readership numbers, things like that. Well, today's the day where we celebrate the gong in and of itself. I don't know where we'd be without these regular observations, but make sure you don't get through a day missing any of these important things. Okay, let's get on to what's got me wound up today. I've ranted about this before, and I'll rant about it again. I'm going to keep exposing this subject, though, no matter how much squeamish city officials and legacy media outlets want to pretend that it isn't happening. Calgary's entire transit system is devolved into a drug and violence-laden dystopian nightmare, and something has to be done about it. As the addiction epidemic continues to grow across North America, every city's grappling with these issues. I can't find one, though, with the dubious honor of actually having closed down their train stations to the public rather than deal with the issue as Calgary did. They've been closed for months. A picture was shared with me yesterday by a commuter as he passed by the Chinook LRT station in Calgary. The shelter was full of addicts in all states. One was in the midst of counting money from a drug exchange. Another was preparing to consume his newly purchased drugs. And another was, well, I would say hopefully simply unconscious. Overdoses have become a daily occurrence at those stations. I was assured by the commuter that this scene was common, and it's often actually worse there. I can believe it. I drive by LRT stations regularly and see the people laid out, along with the ambulances and fire trucks constantly there and parked as the overdoses happen and they're called in. It's a typical scene. I used to take the train to our downtown office from the Westbrook station in Calgary, and syringes and aggressive addicts just became too much for me. I didn't want to deal with it, and I accepted paying to park downtown rather than immerse myself daily in a rolling drug consumption center that reeked of piss and felt unsafe. Ridership on Calgary Transit's at 64% of what it was a couple of years ago. Anybody who can avoid riding those trains right now does. Not everybody has a choice to simply jump in a car like I did, however. Many commuters have no other way to get around rather than use city transit, and they have to endure fearful rides every day just to get to work and back. Multiple random assaults have been happening on train platforms and in transit facilities. The fear of the addicts is not misplaced. They can often be aggressive and dangerous. To one legacy media outlet, to their credit, a CBC reporter went out and took a ride on Calgary's LRT just a couple weeks ago. She reported what she saw. She witnessed 3 overdoses and numerous aggressive actions. For reporting on that, by the way, and that was just on one trip. For reporting on it, many on social media, of course, got on her case and accused her of shaming addicts. Look, we can't let addicts continue to take over the transit system for a city of over 1 million people for fear of shaming them. We can be compassionate while putting our foot down. It doesn't mean we don't care if we take an initiative to remove addicts from city transit facilities and vehicles. It just means that we're accepting that that's not where they belong. The bigger issue of how to deal with addicts once they're removed from transit will remain. We can't refuse, though, to take action on one issue in hopes of avoiding to have to deal with the other issue. Calgary's downtown has nearly a third of its office buildings remaining vacant. Bike lanes have taken out almost all of the street parking, while other parking lots charge a fortune. If the city really wants people to come downtown, they need to take transit. And it has to be safe, and it's nowhere close to that right now. The downtown itself actually is loaded with addicts, feces, and discarded syringes as well. But I just want to mostly stick to the transit issue for today. The first full Calgary stampede in years is approaching, and Calgary's hospitality sector is desperate to see an influx of tourists. How many people, though, are going to make it their last visit to Calgary after riding on the city's horrific transit system and seeing the urban decay around them? Would you really want to take your kids out into that? Mayor Gondek and many of her city council counterparts are trying to bring in an insane $87 billion climate change plan. One aspect of their nutty plan, though, is to have over 60% of Calgarians using transit to get around. Well, I can tell you right now that sure as hell isn't going to happen as long as transit's unsafe, no matter how much they try to punish automobile owners. They're just going to continue to drive more people out of the city altogether. The mayor and the council want to pretend that transit is fine. Maybe if they could be convinced that dealing with the problem will help with their fictional climate emergency, we could see some action. I mean, Calgary is in a state of emergency right now. It just isn't climate related. I bet if they took their elitist asses out for a day and rode city transit as the commoners have to, we would finally see some action as well. But I won't hold my breath on that. All right, so that's what's got me up and wound up today. So let's see here if we've got her waiting. Let's check in with Eva Sudik in our newsroom and see what other news stories are breaking out there across the country today. Hey, Eva, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Cory?
I'm all right. I don't have to ride the train.
Yeah, me neither. I started parking downtown and it has made my life exponentially better.
Yes, it's just expensive.
Yeah, very expensive. But actually with the fees on the transit, my $10 early bird is almost the same price as transit anyway, there and back. So.
Oh, okay. But do it again.
So today in the news, we got UCP Leadership Election Committee has granted federal MP Michelle Rempel Garner an exemption, allowing her to run in the Conservative leadership race after she didn't meet all requirements. That's an exclusive story from our Edmonton reporter, Rachel Emanuel. She has another story up about another UCP candidate, Alberta former Liberal leader Raj Sherman. His bid for leadership has been rejected by the UCP election committee. He requested an exemption, but for not being a member of the Conservative Party for more than 6 months, it was denied. There's more news on the follow-up after Freedom Convoy crackdown that stopped the protests. As the use of the Emergencies Act is investigated, the House of Commons Finance Committee is saying it should be not a template for dealing with the public. MPs from all political parties have stepped up, saying that the use of the Emergencies Act was needless, harsh, and sets dangerous precedent for our government. We have a story out of Massachusetts. A school has lost its Catholic status after refusing to remove Pride and BLM flags from the property. The Nativity School of Worcester received a request from a local bishop to take down its flags, but the privately funded school stood their ground, and the bishop has received criticism from the school's Human Rights Commission. Another story we have is Hockey Canada. It has come out that Hockey Canada took a large sexual assault suit very lightly by not requiring the accused players to take part in the investigation. A $3.5 million settlement went to the victim of the group assault, which included 8 players and 1 victim. Only 4 to 6 players reportedly took part in the investigation, according to MPs. The 8 players were not revealed, and the investigations halted in 2020. A Manitoba boy committed suicide after being the victim of an online blackmail scam. Daniel Lintz sent explicit images of himself and a supposedly attractive female on Snapchat. Within minutes, there was a blackmail attempt, threatening for the image to go viral, and 3 hours later, Daniel committed suicide. His father explains the events and family recoil in Linda Slobodian's story up on our site. Just a horrific story. My prayers go out to the family. Also a cautionary tale for kids of these days, and what can go on the internet, and also what's not a big deal, and the mental health issues around it. A Saskatchewan RCMP are on the lookout for 2 individuals who were involved in a shootout with RCMP on Sunday. Both the men have previous charges, including 1 attempt murder using a firearm. Both the men's names and descriptions are up in our story, and RCMP are looking for anyone with information to come forwards and report it, and you may be eligible for a reward. City News reporter calls NDP candidate transphobic for saying you can't change your entire biological makeup. What the NDP candidate was stating as a fact back in 2015 has been pulled up by the reporter, and NDP nominee Sharif Haj is now issuing an apology. And what just came out on our site is the BC government released a new climate preparedness and adaptation strategy. They want to prevent flooding, wildfires, and other natural events. This plan will cost the province approximately $500 million. Our reporter Reid Small, who will be on your show later on today, just came out with that story. And that was our latest and our live on the site.
Right on. Well, thank you very much. Lots coming up and lots on the go, and I imagine lots to work on in the newsroom. We're down a couple people today, so I won't hold you up too much longer. I know you've got a lot to keep up with. So thanks for the update there, Eva, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks for having me on, Cory.
Great, thanks. So yes, lots and lots breaking and going on out there, guys. This is where I like to remind everybody all those stories, all those columns, all these things, all of this unique content is thanks to you who have subscribed. So if you haven't already, it's $10 a month. $99 a year if you take it out for a full year. Again, there's people who pay more than that to play video games for a subscription for a month, and you get a lot more than that out of it for your service. This is how we stay independent. We do not take any tax dollars. We refuse to, and we're going to continue to go that way. So hey, subscriptions have been great. We're spreading, we're expanding, but if you haven't already subscribed, get on there, guys. We're not asking for charity. We're selling a service, and our subscribers find it to be worthwhile. They come on, they take out a subscription, and they stay on. So check it out, westernstandard.news/membership, and help us carry on with this independent news. All right, yeah, lots going on. Some interesting things that Eva spoke of. The suicide of that poor kid, and that's just a reminder, I guess, when you can. I know it's hard, but try and keep up, I guess, with what your kids are getting onto and what they're doing. So the deal was with that, and I guess this is an ongoing scam, is some fake girl will find young guys online or whatever and manage to, fool them, talk them into thinking they're speaking to a girl. And when you're young and overladen with hormones, you can do foolish things. And he sent pictures of himself that were pretty embarrassing, I guess, out there. And then suddenly they come back with a blackmail request saying, all right, you give us money or we're going to, send these pictures to your family and post it on Facebook and YouTube and whatnot. It's horrible. And then this poor kid, and kids react strongly. He killed himself out of fear and horror out of it. It's just awful, just an awful end. And just talk to kids, make sure they're aware of these things or whatever. Hey, being caught in a compromising picture still isn't worth losing your life over, even if it might feel like it when you're 14 or 15. And just watch out for these scams. It's just what an awful thing. There's horrible, horrible people out there. Getting on to denying reality. I want to talk about another one of those stories. Yeah, that's one that came up with that. I forget the name, but it was an NDP candidate. And this is the big exposure. In 2015, this candidate dared to say you can't change your biological reality. You can't change your biological makeup. Well, it's true. That's just a fact. That's like saying up is up. It's like saying gravity exists. It's like saying the sun rises in the east. But it is now considered politically devastating, at least for the woke, insane left, to state reality. We've gone past the edge, guys. I mean, I support trans people. If somebody identifies as and wants me to refer to them as a she or he or whatever, sure, no problem. I'll indulge however I can. But there's an underlying reality. There's still a physiological reality. Get over it. We can be understanding and compassionate, but we can't reverse reality, guys. We're seeing it in the sports. You know, it's ridiculous. It was funny that the head of the women's soccer team, that woke purple-haired thing, whoever she is in the United States, was going on about how she called it disgusting that some sports are banning, and let's face it, they're banning men from women's sports, biological men at least. Her team, the national United States team, the one I think they won the World Championships of Soccer, lost to a high school team of 15-year-old boys. Yes, they lost. There's a huge advantage. The best women's team in the world still couldn't beat a men's high school team because they're bigger, stronger, and faster. That's just genetics, guys. And it's not being insensitive to point it out. It's just pointing out reality. So, I mean, if the NDP want to keep eating their own, fine, but it's ridiculous. We got to be able to at least say the realities. It doesn't mean you're being insensitive. Being insensitive is being in denial. We got too much denial. That's what I was ranting about earlier with City Hall, denying what's going on downtown. Again, it's the woke denial. They just don't like hard realities. Well, get over it, guys. Because reality always catches up with you in the end. Let's see, Paulette Bergert, commenter, saying good morning, and what's a good place to find the latest on international travel regarding jabs? Not so much getting out of Canada, but getting back in. Just coming from Pincher Creek. I did a rant on that the other day, and I think I put a column up. No, maybe not. There's a short, though, if you look on them. And I listed all the countries, actually, that you can visit without vaccination and some without testing even. Getting back in, not much you can do about that. I mean, they can't keep you from coming back in. You can't. It's your right. But they can force quarantines upon you and a bunch of things if you aren't vaccinated. Hopefully, we get rid of all that crap soon. But as it stands, yeah, there is a bit of a guide for places you can go outwards to, Paula. Just look back onto it. Let's see what else we got in the comments scroll. Oh, yeah, Cheryl Dawn saying, hey, but Calgary just approved allowing bikes on the LRT. Speaking of our transit system. And it's funny because, some of the woke members of city council, the only time we've seen them speak up on the addicts and the crime downtown was like Giancarlo Corrales. Oh, my God, a bike got stolen. Now suddenly it's important. People getting stabbed on platforms, intimidated, robbed. That's not a problem. But as soon as hipsters start losing bikes, now we've got to address this. Well, guess what? Now they can go on there with both bikes because you see that. Do you really believe when you see that guy with his pants around his knees who's shit himself, who's quivering, fully in the throes of addiction, who has two brand new multi-$1,000 bikes next to him while he's riding on the train that he bought them? Of course not. He's riding down to the suburbs where he can meet up with somebody in a parking lot, trade them for some drugs, and then whoever that drug dealer is can sell them on Kijiji for a good profit. But no, let's deny reality. Let's Let's allow bikes on the train. That'll make it better, won't it? Good work, guys. Micah Adam Marsden. Hey, Micah. As his wife's been accosted multiple times on the LRT. Yeah, the system needs to be available for safe use for commuters, as he's saying. And it's true. It's not unreasonable. It's not insensitive to ask for these things. We've got to get real. But we won't. We just won't bloody do it. So let's see here. Okay. I'm going to speak to our sponsor quickly, and I'll get on to our first guest of the day. Reid, unlike the UCP candidates, can find his way onto a digital program, and I appreciate that. So it's our sponsor today as well, the other thing that keeps us independent, and that is Bitcoin Well. These guys are, again, a good Albertan company. They are set up out here, bricks and mortar. Because, again, you got to watch for things. So many scams, so many ripoffs. Like I mentioned, that horrible case with that kid out in the east there, but still, it's not always blackmail. Sometimes it's just ripoffs. And in digital currencies, people are nervous. Bitcoin Well makes sure you're dealing with somebody trustworthy, somebody safe. It's your money. You worked hard for it. They are a non-custodial service. They help you get into the world of digital currencies. They show you the ways to make it practical for yourself. And they even set you up for e-transfer. I mean, you can basically pop online, e-transfer from your bank account into your Bitcoin account, trouble-free, extremely low fees, and you always have control of your own money. If you're looking to get into digital currencies right now, guys, bitcoinwell.com. Check them out. The site is very deep, gives you all sorts of background information, and you can have free one-on-one in-person consultations with a live person to help you decide whether or not Bitcoin's right for you. So check them out, bitcoinwell.com, and take control of your money. All right, let's see what's happening out on the West Coast in BC there. We've got Reid Small. He's been very prolifically reporting out there. Hey, Reid, how's it going?
It's going good, thank you.
I appreciate you joining us today. You've got a lot of stories on the go. One Eva said just popped up onto the site. Maybe we want to start there. What's going on?
Yeah, the BC government just released its new climate, the climate preparedness and adaptation strategy, which is supported by more than $500 million, 513 to be exact. Most of that funding has already been announced over the last year, but they've released the strategy now to more or less show where it's going to be allocated, and that's going to be various actions to reduce the future impact of wildfire, flooding impacts. They mentioned the heat dome that supposedly killed more than 600 people last summer. So yeah, I mean, we all remember the fall of 2021 when there was the Abbotsford Merritt, more than 45,000 people evacuated as a result of these weather events over the last year. And yeah, the new plan basically just it aims to tackle all of that, but it focuses on I guess what you could call anthropogenic climate change. So the idea that carbon emissions are impacting these weather events in some way. And so like, for example, last week, the federal government just announced it was going to give Lytton $77 million, most of which is going to go towards building net zero buildings. So yeah, there's a big focus from the province in agreement with the federal government on sort of these net zero policies to address wildfire, flooding, heat waves, that kind of thing.
Well, you guys are getting a good deal. I mean, with a province the size of BC, it's only $500 million. In Calgary alone, we're going at $87 billion with Gondek's plan here. So you guys really got to catch up on the climate change race.
Yeah, no kidding. It's there's a lot of people are raising concerns, particularly towards the wildfire situation. They're saying that there are more obvious things that can be done to prevent like things that happened in places like Lytton without this focus on the need to have X amount of zero emission vehicles by 2030 or something like that. People will focus on, they'll say, well, look at the forest management system. They'll say we're cutting down all this deciduous growth, which is naturally fire resistant. We're planting pine, which is highly flammable. And we're wondering why wildfires are getting worse each year. But there's been no addressing of anything regarding the forest management industry. It's all about anthropogenic climate change and the need to reduce carbon emissions.
Yeah, it's they're always hung up on that, but we'll just watch them continue. Hopefully we get some realism. And yeah, forest management, I talked about that last week. I mean, we got to get realistic, and there's a lot of people in forestry who are pointing that out, and they're trying to tell them that, but they're focused on climate change. So, well, I guess we got to see a little more burn yet. Let's see some other stuff you had going on. The BC Liberals have called on BC to suspend vaccine mandates.
Yeah, they're suggesting that the province follows the federal government's lead by suspending vaccine mandates. They didn't say they wanted the vaccine mandates to end. They were very careful to repeatedly use the word suspend, much like the federal government. And so, yeah, Kevin Falcon, the BC Liberals have openly supported mandatory vaccination for healthcare workers, provincial workers in the past, but now that they're saying that those were supposed to be temporary and therefore it's time to lift them. And of course, people are kind of rolling their eyes and going, well, what did you expect to happen when you brought these in the first place? Did you really think that they were going to easily just let them go? But yeah, Kevin Falcon is now speaking out in contrast to his previous stance on the vaccine requirements.
Well, I guess suspend is getting closer to getting rid of, but everybody's covering their butts. It's unfortunate we can't see much courage politically that often, but take what we can get, I guess. Let's see what else we got in your story scroll. a crazy machete attack going on in Vancouver?
Yeah, that's actually the second machete attack to happen in East Vancouver. The last one was only 19 days ago. This one in particular, a police officer was waved over to the Empress Hotel on near Main and Hastings streets, and he saw a guy waving a machete around. That's why he was called over. And then, as it turned out, two people that were loading their luggage into a vehicle were just randomly and unexpectedly slashed by this guy with the machete. Both of them ended up in hospital with pretty serious injuries to the head and neck, but they're expected to make a full recovery. And the one that happened only 19 days prior to this one was also a man had to be hospitalized due to head and neck injuries. He was also stabbed in the back with the machete. And this was just one incident in Vancouver over the weekend. It was a particularly violent Father's Day weekend. We're still seeing an average of, according to the Vancouver police, 4 random assaults every day on average. And there was a few other stabbings. Someone was bear maced. Someone had an airsoft gun held to their face. Just a bunch of random things popping up here and there as far as violent crime goes.
So is this mostly gathered, though, East Hastings, Kingsway, the areas we kind of anticipate this to happen, or is there issues kind of popping up all over the city?
It's all over the city. For example, there was the guy with the airsoft gun incident that was held to him. The guy was pretending it was a real gun. That happened, I believe it was near Stanley Park, like right by the seawall there in the West End, which is supposed to be, a nicer neighborhood. I lived in the West End for a while. And I remember after the first lockdown during that first wave, I remember going up to the Shoppers Drug Mart. It was around midnight, and you could just feel there was a different vibe. All the small businesses were closed, and just kind of some of the characters that were hanging around nearby, it just had a different vibe. And sure enough, the security guard at that Shoppers was stabbed about 20 minutes after I left that night. I remember reading the news the next day and being like, wow, I missed that by, 20 minutes. And then the stats reflect that there's been more than a 7% increase in violent crime in Vancouver compared to pre-COVID levels.
Yeah, the world's getting a little crazy. I mean, a lot of it, without doubt, we're seeing in Calgary, as I was talking earlier about our transit system. And Linda Swobodian put out a story on how well decriminalization of drugs worked in Oregon. It sounds like they've had a 700% increase in overdoses. Unfortunately, we're just going to see a lot more mayhem until we could figure out how to get this addiction epidemic under control.
Yeah. Well, there, as we all know, BC is going to be decriminalizing small amounts of drugs, personal possession under 2.5 grams. So we'll see how that plays out. I don't know how much of a difference it will really make because no one was getting arrested for small possession anyways. The whole idea is that it's supposed to just destigmatize it, the use, and I guess the theory is that will make people feel more comfortable to seek help and whatnot. Hopefully, it doesn't end up like what's going on down in Oregon there. We'll see.
Yeah, the commenter June Marie saying, see, Portland, yeah, unfortunately, it's turned into a failure. I mean, again, we're looking for realistic solutions. If they'd done that in Portland a couple of years ago, holy cow, it was working like a charm, and they're getting people into treatment, and survival rates are going up. Hey, bring it on. Let's have it up here. But it seems to be a catastrophe. So I don't know. They don't seem to. Again, we're getting ideology blinding things from reality, I'm afraid.
Yeah, for sure. And it's I'm reading your Twitter timeline. It sounds like things are pretty bad in Calgary right now as well. A lot of drug use going on buses and sky trains and that kind of thing. So,
it's a different world, and I'm considerably older than you. But I mean, I remember, drug use was always around, but nothing like this, nothing at all. I mean, East Hastings, it always was kind of North America's heroin capital. And it was kind of noteworthy because it'd be like a 3-block area where you would kind of see that. And now it's across the country. It's every city is dealing with this. The new kid on the block there is that fentanyl. I mean, it's not that new, but getting out to the public and people hooked on it. And of course, how horrifically dangerous it is for overdoses. Maybe
Mhm.
I'll kind of segue that into a story there. I see Denise Martin saying, yeah, 2.5 grams of fentanyl is enough for 25,000 people, perhaps. Yeah, it's just crazy how powerful that stuff is.
She's
And
absolutely right. Yeah.
some BC fentanyl was tied to American Navy deaths.
Yeah, that was down in Georgia. In 2017, 2 U.S. Navy servicemen died of a drug overdose, and the packaging that was found was linked to a vendor called Canada One, which was a dark web drug selling vendor based out of North Vancouver, and so that led to a several year long investigation with RCMP and authorities in the U.S., and that led to the arrest of a North Vancouver man as well as a UK man that was living in North Vancouver at the time. These guys were shipping fentanyl out around the world, and they were ordering it in from Hungary and China, and then selling it through their vendor to whoever wanted to buy it. And unfortunately, 2 of those people were U.S. Servicemen, and they died as a result of taking the fentanyl.
Yeah, so it's just awful stuff, and we're all tied together. It's integrated. As you're saying, such tiny amounts can be so potent. So I mean, it's difficult to stop the smuggling of it because a small package is pretty easy to hide and get across a border that big.
Yeah, and unfortunately too, in Vancouver, when someone dies of a drug overdose, users will, as one drug dealer put it when I was talking to him, a former drug dealer, will flock to the source because it indicates a strong supply. Obviously this isn't the case with, wealthier college kids that are partying, doing cocaine, that kind of thing. But the street users that are addicted to opioids, if they hear someone dies, they're going for that supply. It's really a sad situation.
Yeah, well, we'll get on something, I guess, a little more frustrating, but a little lighter. The BC Museum, that's a big issue we hear about in here now and then. I mean, on a couple of fronts. For one, the old museum apparently was too offensive to the woke, so they just had to tear it down. There was no fixing it. But the new one is going to cost a fortune, and it doesn't sound like BC citizens are all that thrilled with the idea.
Yeah. The majority of BC citizens, according to the Angus Reid poll, are opposed to that museum, which is going to cost, as most people know by now, nearly $800 million. So we'll see if they're going to proceed with it. It seems like the government will. And as we talked about last time, Kevin Falcon initially said he was going to scrap the plan if elected, but according to the timelines set forth in the business case for the museum, demolition will begin before the next provincial election. So it looks like it's going to go forward, regardless of whether British Columbians support it or not. They're going to be paying for it. And that's about that. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, when they move with these things, they seems to work though, right? Ignore the people. It doesn't matter. They get upset, but election time, they get back in. So we'll see what happens. I guess I hope they stay somewhat within budget. These things rarely do, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, they claim that the price of tearing it down and rebuilding is actually substantially more affordable than renovating the current museum, which also we have talked about before. So I won't get too deep into that, but I mean, there's a bunch of schools that need upgrading. This is kind of what people are pointing to. They're like, look, our healthcare system's broken. We've got schools that need to be seismically upgraded. Of course, the NDP government is saying that that's one of the main reasons that they want to rebuild the museum, is because that it's seismically unsafe. So, yeah.
Oh, we'll see what happens. Before I let you go, you got anything else coming up to look forward to in the news the next day or so?
Yeah, I'm going to be putting out a story later today on concerns of price gouging at various gas stations in BC.
Okay, well, you guys are paying your share of prices as it goes out there. It'll be interesting to see the root of all that.
As a truck driver, it's been a rough couple of months.
Yeah, well, it cuts right into your profit margin. All right. Well, thanks for coming in to check in with us today, Reid, and thanks for keeping up all that good news content out there in BC for us.
Right on. Thanks very much, Cory.
All right, thank you. So that is our BC reporter, Reid Small. As you can see, he's constantly writing good, unique content coming out of BC. Just that reminder, subscribe, guys. We've got news. He writes it as it's breaking, and he follows up. Another thing I want to make sure to mention today while I'm at it, we've got a debate coming up on July 8th in Calgary. It'll be in the afternoon at the Petroleum Club. $25 to get there. You can see, well, 4 of the Conservative Party of Canada leadership candidates, and it's a good intimate atmosphere. There's just going to be a few hundred people there. You can really get perhaps some one-on-one time with them. There's going to be some cocktail time afterwards and see in person how they interact. It's like sporting events, things like that. When you go in person, it really is actually kind of more fun and interesting than when you watch it on TV. I mean, TV's good. Being there in person is better. So check it out. There it is, July 8th, $25 a ticket. And you get into the Peak Club, a neat old building there and a facility, and take in that debate on a Friday afternoon. So go to westernstandard.news and you'll be able to find out how you can take part in all of that. So it's going to be quite an event for us. Let's see here. I just want to go on some of the stuff covered. I noticed Johnny Arabian, where'd it go? I've scrolled down, lost it in the comments, talking about with the drugs starting with doctors. This whole addiction issue is complicated. It's big, and it starts in a number of areas. And a big part in the opioids, yes, was not so much fentanyl, though that's come out of prescription drugs to begin with as well. But of course, oxy and things like that, which were effective painkillers. Now, that gets to there was a story of a gentleman. He was an addiction, a recovered man in San Francisco. I read a while back, and he was on the streets. He'd hit rock bottom. He started with a sports injury, but then he got onto the pills. He was a stable guy, a professional. Got onto the prescriptions from his doctor. By the time he recovered from his injury, he was hopelessly addicted to the pills. It got to the point that his life fell apart. He ended up on the streets, a full-out street person, full-out addict, in a lot of trouble. Finally ended up in jail and did recover and clean up. But it started with a prescription. And prescriptions are where a lot of these drugs begin. I mean, people who left them in the medicine cabinet and the kids get a hold of it and maybe you weren't watching. Or another aspect that people don't like talking about, but Canada's screwed up healthcare system where you wait on waiting lists. We're talking, a hip replacement, you're over a year waiting, a knee replacement. What do you think the doctor's going to do? They're going to give you a whole bunch of painkillers. And some of those opioids are very addictive, and you might come out of these things very addicted after the fact. There's also unprincipled doctors. I'm going to give one of my anecdotal stories here, but it's from back when I worked in Ohio. I was working on a survey job out there some years back, and I was trying to cut some brush, and I had the chainsaw going. I was in a t-shirt. It gets really hot out there in summer, and this branch with a bunch of thorns went right into my forearm, and the thorn, I could see it disappear out of my flesh. It was horrible, big, long thing. And it stuck down there, and it started to infect. My arm was getting pretty hot after a day or so, and swelling and red around there. So I went across the river. The nearest convenient town was just over in West Virginia, and I hit a walk-in clinic. And while I'm waiting in this clinic, I'm seeing, people coming and going, and eventually I get my spot with the doctor. But boy, it's a busy clinic, a lot of people coming. I get to the back, I sit in the, it's like any other clinic, a waiting room. The doctor comes in, how you doing? And I said, yeah, I got this thorn, I want it taken care of. He says, what's your pain level, 1 to 10? I don't know, 2 or 3 or something. It's not that bad. I just need this thorn out of here. He looks at it. It's beyond, you got to go see an orthopedic surgeon or something like that, or go to a hospital. I can't help you with that. Is it really? It's just a thorn that's in a bit. I just need no, I can't deal with that. I said, okay, fine. And then he says again, what's your pain level? 1 to, it's fine. And it didn't strike me what's going on. And then I went out and I filled out the things. I had insurance because I was working down there, and I made sure, you don't want to get stuck in the States with a bad injury. And I'm filling out the paperwork, and then I'm realizing again with these people coming and going, this doctor's office was a pill pusher. That's all he was. Of course, West Virginia, they got their challenges out there. But that's why these people could come in and go that fast, because he could come get these patients in and out of there, write them scripts, as long as they fill out their thing to say, oh, my pain is up at 9, and he was giving them oxy. He was dumping that stuff through that clinic like nobody's business. And that's where a lot of these addicts start. I mean, at least over there in the eastern states, and it happens all over. And then, of course, if they run out of the money or the means to go to a doctor's office to get these kind of pills, well, then they move on to other things, and then they move on to street drugs, and things go bad. This whole addiction thing is a giant, complicated, convoluted problem, but it's huge. It's growing. It's killing people. It's out of control. And again, it's one of those ones where a lot of people just don't want to face reality and how to deal with it. But one of the other ones is, again, you could be sensitive to the needs of an addict, but also firm. There's certain areas they can't go. And if they're committing crimes, we can't keep pretending. We heard that crap, like safe consumption centers. The left is just friggin' over the top, obsessed with safe consumption centers. Look, I believe in harm mitigation. I do believe we can't treat addicts if they are dead. If they will go to a safe consumption site and avoid an overdose, good. There's a better chance we might be able to catch these people and fix them up and get them when they're ready. But they have limits, and most of the junkies don't use them. How many safe consumption centers can we have? That's the problem. They're all over the trains. And you also, the belt line of Calgary, what it did do is those addicts who do use the safe consumption centers all, of course, congregate at them. Go outside the Sheldon Schumer Center in Calgary and have a look around. It's horrible. It's again, speaking of dystopian, they literally set up camp all the way around the outside of the building, and they're consuming drugs right outside the building, even if they only have to walk 100 yards to go into the safe because they just don't want to bother with it anymore. It's just turned into a hangout. And what do you think happens? The dealers follow them there. So now you get these drug dealers all hanging around in an area full of residential areas, apartments. Theft has shot through the roof down there. These addicts need to feed their habits. And of course, again, when they go on meth and things like that, they go out of control. They go wild. They can go dangerously. People don't want to be down there. They don't want to work down there. Quit pretending they're harmless. I remember when they brought the Safe Consumption Center in, there were the hipsters and the others. Oh, no, it doesn't hurt the community. We love it. It's not a problem. We're happy with it. Bullshit. You are not people who live near there. You're not the people who had to deal with that. You're not the people who had to step over human crap on the street. You're not the people who can't leave anything outside for more than 5 seconds without it being stolen. You're not the ones who have to watch what used to be a nice neighborhood and seeing drug dealers going on across the street or seeing people picking up overdoses all the time. There's big problems that happen when you have large amounts of addicts gathering in an area, as we see on city transit right now. And again, it's not saying the addicts are monsters. It's not saying they should be shot or locked up. But let's quit pretending they're harmless. They are not. They're in a dangerous place. Some are harmless, some aren't. So don't try and shame people when they say, I don't like to ride the train because I'm afraid to. I don't blame them. It's scary on there. And don't get on people's cases if they do point out that these people could be problematic. A person in the throes of an addiction that deep can be very dangerous. It's not fair, but it's the way it is. So let's get reality. I want that to be the word for the day. Reality. Even if you don't like it, face it. Let's talk about one of our sponsors before I carry on here. And that is the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Speaking of reality, the government is coming after your firearms. They want to take them away from you. They want to take away your property. They want to take your right to enjoy firearms responsibly, as you do legally, as you do for now. And you got to stand up for yourself, guys. If you do not, they will take that away. And one of the ways you can stand up for yourself is getting a membership with the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. And it's an association of people who take part in shooting sports. Target shooting, hunting, collecting, it doesn't really matter. Thing is, you got to work together. There's one thing the left's learned, solidarity, get together, organize. Well, that's how you do it. Canadian Shooting Sports Association, this is where firearm owners get together. You can network, you can pool your resources and fight back against the government that's trying to take away your rights to do something perfectly legal and harmless right now. So check them out. Canadian Shooting Sports Association, CSSA-CILA.org. Take out a membership with them, guys. It's an investment in yourself, I guess you could say, so that you can protect those rights that are so important. All right. Johnny Arabian saying Justin Trudeau is the best pistol salesman in world history. Yeah, pretty much. There's been a run on that. We've been talking with the wholesalers and others I had a guest on. I mean, they are backed up. They're basically, handguns are sold out across the country. Processing now is the big backup, of course, because you got all these bureaucrats that have to file through all those applications, and everything has to be processed before the transfer will happen to a person. But there was probably that was the biggest rush for handguns purchased in all of Canadian history. Thanks, Mr. Trudeau. Good work. Jet Gorgon saying, yeah, our safe injection site says they clean up constantly outside. Sure, it's the neighboring biz that gets the poop, needles, and vomit on their doorsteps. Yes. I mean, I know they do try to clean up around there. And, just to point out another thing with the Sheldon Schumer, and I do think there should be these centers. We should have these options. I had an addiction specialist on who was talking about an interesting thing. Dr. What's his name? Gorish? I'm screwing it up. But that's his specialty. And a lot of these, there's actually basically Zoom meeting style supervised consumption, because 60% of the overdoses, the fatal ones in Calgary and in Alberta, and they're happening every day, by the way, happen in households. They aren't on the streets. Those are just the ones we see. And they'll actually have a service where a person will supervise somebody through Zoom and watch them consume. And basically they can call an ambulance if they flatline or drop or whatever. Now, again, I want to keep these people alive, but at the same time, how long are we enabling them for? When are we going to get real? I saw a story on one of the safe consumption sites too, and it was a news one, and they talked to this girl who they made it out to sound as if it's a minor inconvenience being a junkie. She says, I come down here in the morning to get my fix, and I'm just a run-of-the-mill person. I just want to make sure it's safe while I do it, and then I work and I carry on, and I come back in the afternoon and I get my next fix at the consumption center and I carry on. You can't carry on like that, okay? I mean, I don't want to see people overdose. I think if we can get them into centers and prevent overdoses or things such as that, it's good. But this was making it out as if you could live with an opioid addiction like that, to that degree, and just carry on with a normal life. No, you can't. You're on the road to death. It's just a matter of time. You're going to become increasingly dysfunctional. You won't be able to work at all. You're going to have health issues. You may find yourself in the streets. May follow that progression from being what appeared to be a moderately healthy addict to one of those sore-covered ones who can't even prostitute long enough to just get drugs anymore. Then it's on to theft, and then you die. That's how we should be labeling the progression of drug use, not, hey, we can set up enough safe consumption sites so people can live functionally and be perfectly fine while they're on it, because they can't. And it's a delusion. So again, I'm not saying take away her ability to have safe consumption, but let's not pretend that facilitating people to and enabling them to stay on these things for a long period of time is sustainable, smart, or even humane. It's the wrong path to go. But we're so backwards on this, and the outcomes have been so terrible, and nobody will bloody well admit it. Let's see. I'm going to get into another story here quickly. So getting to the Commons committees and everything, I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of things with, I've been talking about that a lot. We're watching these things with the Emergencies Act, and as they're reviewing it, and it hasn't even gone on to the judicial inquiry yet. This is just the Commons committees, and they've been questioning, and now there's even MPs who supported the action targeting these protesters are saying, I think we blew it, and it shouldn't happen again. Yeah, they're saying don't do it again. And they're saying, exercise caution before invoking the Emergencies Act. I think they're covering their asses is what they're doing. They're realizing that when the investigation happens, they're going to realize, and I think most of us already realize that the Trudeau government was not justified. They did not have nearly a good enough case to invoke the Emergencies Act. It was a panicked reaction on an authoritarian government on their part to an issue that could have been dealt with without suspending civil liberties. And even Liberal and NDP members now that committee are saying that this was not justified. It didn't. They should not have cracked down on people like that. These arrests, these freezing of bank accounts. They're saying this is a dangerous precedent. And even the Bloc is saying they called it a legislative atomic bomb that was harsh and needless. Now, remember, the Bloc wrote in support of in putting it in. Here's one of the mixed things. We want our politicians to admit when they make a mistake. Fair enough. And that was a big one. It's a huge one. At least they're admitting it at this point. I think maybe because they're not going to have a choice pretty soon but to admit it. But let's not crap on them too much for admitting it at this point. But we still can only forgive them so much for having imposed that act in the first place. They should have been listening to us before they voted to suspend civil rights to deal with protesters. All the Bloc MPs wrote, we hope the government's following we hope that following this report, the government will justify its use. However, in light of testimony in the report, we've come to the conclusion the government will not have any new rationale to offer because there is none. Yeah, like it's falling apart as with the benefit of hindsight to look at what happened with the invocation of the Emergencies Act and basically the modern day version of the War Measures Act was brought about by Justin Trudeau. They seized people's bank accounts and arrested people. They theoretically could have forced labor with tow truck drivers, and none of it was needed. Not a minor thing. All right, let's see. Well, I'm going to get ready to get on to our next guest here. It's getting about time. So I've got in the lobby, it's going to be Colin Craig. He's with secondstreet.org. He's been on before. They do a lot of good work, put out a lot of good reports and papers. And a recent one is just great. It kind of ties into these municipal governments that, speaking of reality, just really need a good dose of it and some common sense. So let's bring Colin in when he's ready there and have a conversation on that latest report, one of which was on parking passes for municipal employees across Canada. Hey, Colin, how's it going?
Good, yourself, Cory?
Very good, thanks. Yeah, so I just I want to talk a little more actually on a couple of things. Follow up a little more on your Survivors of Socialism initiative because it's just fantastic. But in the more immediate one is that recent release you put out showing the amount of municipal employees who get parking passes. I thought they were all green and they're supposed to ride bikes and take the train.
Well, that's a good point. We saw a lot of cities across Canada declaring climate emergencies and urging the phase out of fossil fuels in different ways. In Ontario, a number of cities indicated that they want no more natural gas powered electricity. In Manitoba, the city council there, in Winnipeg, they passed a motion looking into how they can phase out natural gas in the city. And of course, Winnipeg is one of the coldest major cities on the planet. So a lot of people there use natural gas to heat their homes. A lot of businesses use it and so forth. So we saw these different motions happening across Canada. And we thought, well, wait a second, let's take a look into how many of these cities are giving their staff and council members free parking passes. Because of course, these cities are trying to get everyone else to stop using oil and gas products. What about council? Are they making it easy for councillors to keep driving? If you're giving someone a free parking pass, you're certainly making it easy to do so. And so we filed freedom of information requests with, I think it was around 20 different cities or so in pretty much from Ontario west. And we got some pretty interesting responses.
Yeah. So, you would think in Calgary, this was a crisis. This is an emergency, as you said. Are our systems not adequate then for civil employees?
Well, I think what we saw is council declared a climate emergency for you and I and your listeners, but not for the city itself. Calgary's giving out over 1,000 free parking passes to various staff, including council members. And council members not only have access to free parking at the city's parkade at City Hall, they also get a special pass which allows them to park at any metered parking spot in the city. And one former city employee indicated that they can also park in loading zones. So it's kind of interesting that the City Hall makes it really, really easy for councillors to park anywhere for free, but yet the rest of us are supposed to be, riding bicycles and walking and taking transit and that. And so, we're flagging this as an option for councils. We assume that they were just too busy figuring out how everyone else could reduce their carbon footprint, that maybe they forgot about their own. And so we flagged this in, like I say, in many provinces and cities across the country.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you, pointing it out. This is above and beyond, some businesses provide parking for staff, some don't. Would that be considered a taxable benefit though for city staff?
It is a taxable benefit, yes. But yeah, certainly you're going to pay less than in your taxes on that benefit than if you had to straight up pay for the pass. And, one thing we noted when we put this out was that we don't begrudge cities giving free parking to their council members, even, more senior staff. It's a common perk in the private sector. I think the problem is when cities are declaring climate emergencies and telling everyone that, hey, we got to stop using CO2 and it's an emergency. Well, then why are you still encouraging council members to drive to work? And so if council members had to do like the rest of society and pay for parking, then you might see some behavioral changes at the top.
Well, yeah. And again, they have access to transit. You think they'd be able to lead by example? We'll give a free transit pass then. And fair enough. That's a benefit and it's falling within the green ideals and you can ride the line. But I got a feeling a lot of them don't actually want to ride city transit.
Well, I don't have data on how many of them use transit and how often they do. I know they do actually get a free transit pass. So they get the free transit pass, they get the free park, basically a free park anywhere pass. and then a free pass at the city's parkade. So they get all kinds of options there. And, to go back to this point, if you're going to say that there's a climate emergency, then there's, I think, only really two options for you to consider, and that would be transit or, you walk or ride your bicycle. But, it wasn't just Calgary that was doing this. We flagged or identified over 5,400 free parking passes that cities have been handing out. Toronto was another big one. They also gave out over 1,000 free parking passes there. Victoria, BC, oddly enough, I mean, they're one of the most aggressive when it comes to green policies. They like to think of themselves as a green city and a green province and so forth. They actually were arguably one of the worst offenders. They gave out 179 free passes, which isn't that high, but they gave out 97 free passes for local politicians. And, there's not 97 politicians on Victoria's City Council. There'd be a relatively small number, but they were giving them out to all kinds of other municipalities in the Victoria region. All those municipalities were getting free parking passes to come and park in Victoria. So it was pretty bizarre. They even gave federal MPs free parking passes. Elizabeth May got one. And so, there were a couple other jurisdictions where they would do that. They would give it out to other levels of government, but nothing like Victoria, where it was seemingly they were giving out these free parking passes to politicians in every direction as far as the eye could see. It was pretty strange.
Nice work if you can get it, I guess.
Yeah.
Getting on, I guess I'll segue, with the old do as I say, not as I do. And that's a common thread in socialist regimes and places like that, where some bureaucrats could live in very large places and drive very nice cars while the commoners are typically in row housing and using transit. Your Survivors of Socialism series, how's that been coming along?
It's been coming along pretty well, thanks. We actually, the Canada Strong and Free Network had their annual conference at the beginning of May. And I had the honor of speaking with Yunmi Park. She is a pretty well-known young lady who escaped from North Korea at the age of 13. And she didn't just quietly become part of the Western world. She's been a vocal advocate for her people, drawing attention to the atrocities that have occurred in North Korea. And so I had the opportunity to interview her on stage, ask her questions and it was a real honor. And we've got that video posted on our Survivors of Socialism page if anyone wants to watch it. But it's pretty incredible. We're still looking for more stories. We're trying to talk to people from different countries to get this information out there so people can hear those perspectives. And one of the big research components of that project was that we were asking people from socialist and communist countries, Canadians who came from those countries, what policies, if any, concern you about what you're seeing in Canada today? Because they remind you of the countries that you fled. And the number one concern that we heard about was actions by governments to try and restrict freedom of speech. And many people noted two of the federal pieces of legislation that we're looking at doing that. So it's pretty interesting that people that have come from these countries where they've had very little in the way of human rights, where people often get killed because they're a political opponent, and people who speak out and protest get thrown in jail. It was interesting to hear that people that came from those countries are concerned about just restrictions on freedom of speech in Canada. I don't think anyone would say that we're close to a Venezuela or a communist China or something like that. But it is concerning that we're seeing these movements on restricting freedom of speech.
Yeah, well, it's worth knowing, that we might be moving in that direction. And I mean, most of the Canadians, we are living under some great freedoms, and it's not so bad. And I think that's some of the risk that comes. A lot of young people don't really understand. I mean, socialism, communism hold a fantastic appeal when you look at just the basics on the theory and so on in a simple way. But you're very hard pressed to find anybody who's actually lived through it who says, yeah, that was a really good idea, and I think we should go back to it.
Yeah, and that's a key problem, because we see this all the time in Canada, where you have university professors or politicians or activists talking about, yay, we got to embrace socialism. It's like, okay, well, have you tried living under that regime? And inevitably the answer is no, because when you talk to people that have lived under those structures, whether it's Venezuela, China, not so much China today, but China in the past, where there was more of a collective state-controlled economy. Now it's much more entrepreneurial. They still have that overarching lack of freedoms and democratic rights in China, but you know, it's a good example from the past of sort of that collective approach to government. You look at the former Soviet Union, other places in Central America and so forth, and the results are not good. And they're pretty clear that that structure does not work well for citizens. Inevitably, you see poverty and human suffering. And Venezuela is a great example right now. The United Nations has noted that I believe it's over 6 million people from Venezuela have fled the country simply because of significant poverty. The average person has lost something like 20 pounds because there's not enough food. And that's a country that's blessed with great natural resources. There's lots of oil there, nice beaches and so forth, but can't make a go of it because of the government structure is socialist in nature. And inevitably it's led to a lot of human misery.
Yeah, well, and I mean, there's a lot of, I think, you know, you don't see it as much as you used to. And I think it's because people got called out on social media by people who'd been there. And that's with Cuba. I mean, a lot of people, I remember 20 years ago, especially in Canada, and professors and others, and they would point to saying, look at this example of a beautiful workman's paradise. It's fantastic down there. They got great health care and all this. Until you could start hearing the voices of the Cubans who escaped there, the ones who got here, and they get upset, and I don't blame them. They say, guys, I had to get on a rickety raft and cross the ocean to Florida to get away from that hell. You're quit portraying this country that put my family through that misery as some sort of paradise. It's anything but. And you don't hear that as much anymore. I think open communication from people who escaped those countries is part of what brought that down.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. And that's always the great test, is there are people trying to get into those countries. And like you say, with Cuba, if it's such a paradise, why, and I'll put paradise in air quotes, why is it that Cubans have been creating these little rafts and climbing onto tiny fishing vessels and doing everything they can to escape the country? In Cuba, there's even been cases where people have climbed into the wheel wells of airplanes where the landing gear is. They run onto the airfield and they climb up into these airplanes. And, you know, if you think about it, these airplanes get really, really high up into the atmosphere. There's a lack of oxygen. They can die from not getting enough air. They can die because it's extremely cold. They can die when the plane starts to come down and the landing gear opens up at a very high height and people can fall out and die. So, I mean, you've got people risking their lives to get out of Cuba. We know what happened during after World War II, when Germany was split between East and West Germany. It was people on the eastern side, the communist side, that were trying to escape to the west. You look at North Korea, like I said, Yeonmi Park, she escaped from North Korea to try and get away from that country. So time and time again, you look at whether or not people are trying to get into these socialist paradises, and the answer is no. And, you know, one thing I would just add is we talk about this on our site and in some of the videos that we have, is that people often say, well, Scandinavia is a socialist part of the world and they're doing extremely well. That this is the claim. And the fact is that Scandinavian countries are not socialist countries. They are market-based economies that use the wealth created from those markets to pay for generous social welfare programs. So it's fundamentally a market-based economy, not a socialist economy. And if people want to advocate for the Scandinavian model, by all means, go for it, but just don't call it a socialist economy, because that's not accurate.
Yeah, well, and again, I mean, we can't pretend, we shouldn't be able to pretend that we don't know any better. And that's where it's great to see it documented. It's fine if you were raised here and you talk to students and you grew up and you're young, but I mean, now you're growing, you can listen to some of the people who actually lived through it. And I appreciate you guys getting that up there so people can hear those voices directly. It's not your opinion as a website or an advocate or an author. It's just straight up, you know, conversations from people who actually had to experience it, and people can take from it what they will.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it, I think, is that people can hear directly from individuals who lived in those regimes. So whether it's Cuba or someone who escaped from Venezuela, like I said, North Korea, we talked to someone from Latvia, Romania, China, and so forth. We're looking to talk to more people. So if anyone's watching and they've come from a socialist or communist country, we'd be interested in hearing your experience.
Great. Well, and before I wrap up then, yeah, so they can find you at secondstreet.org, I believe it is. And have you got other initiatives you want to let us know about before you go? Or
That's a good question. We got lots of stuff in the works. We've got our policy brief coming out on healthcare in the near future with an idea that we think can help patients and governments with long waiting lists. So that one's coming up. We've got some research coming up on housing and lots of other fun little projects that are underway.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to talking to you when those come out as well. And I guess, keep up the good work out there. And thanks for coming on the show today, Colin.
Okay. Thanks, Cory. Appreciate it.
Great. Thanks. So that was Colin Craig of secondstreet.org. Get on there and check it out. Their site's, again, a lot of resources, a lot of videos. As he said with healthcare, same sort of thing. What I really like with their focus that's different from a lot of other, think tank type websites or advocacy is they get firsthand accounts, so you can get on there and see those videos and hear from other people. It's not just reading a bunch of long, boring academic essays and studies. That's what dorks like Colin and I do. For normal people, you can get on and get these video clips or at least the summaries and the reports and see what's happening. And it's, as I was saying as well, I just think it's important for people to listen to others on it. Then it's get that direct thing, see a video of somebody talking about what they experienced, because you can delude yourself. You can believe, those texts. As we said, we saw a lot of it in universities, and you really don't hear those people trumpeting about how fantastic Cuba is anymore. You don't, but you used to a lot. And again, a lot of it is, as soon as they start trumpeting how great Cuba is on social media, well, a bunch of former Cubans are going to come right on there and say, hey, you are full of crap. I lived through that. Don't tell me how it is down there. So good work on that place, on the part of their place there with secondstreet.org with Colin. I'm going to speak to one more sponsor one more time quickly, and that is Bitcoin Well. Just to remind you with these guys, some of the services they offer, they have, they bring digital currencies home to you. They make them practical, right? As I said, you've got e-transfers. You can e-transfer into your Bitcoin wallet. Also, they've got ATMs. You can see those dots all across Canada. You can deposit into your Bitcoin account at any of those ATMs, and they're expanding. They're a publicly traded company, and they are there to help educate you and get you comfortable with getting involved and safely with Bitcoin. So, they've got the savings plans. They got Bitcoin Academy. You can take courses online, learn what it's about. They're partnered with Athabasca University on that. A good, reputable Western company. Check them out, bitcoinwell.com, and take control of your money. All right, let's look at a little more socialism and government inefficiency. This is, come out in the news. I believe it's on the Western Standard site now, too. I'm not sure, but it's going to be coming. The federal agency that runs passport offices suspended hundreds of employees under the vaccine mandate. Here's one of the no-brainers coming along, right? And they wonder why it's backed up. This is some of the stupidity. I mean, there's one of their excuses on why passports now are taking months and months just to renew. And some of it is we found 70% of them are still working from home, obviously not doing a very good job of it, but that's what's happening there. And, well, if they're working from home, why did you need them vaccinated then? Why this push? Why these mandates? So now you've fired hundreds of people and they haven't come back. And now we've got the offices are overwhelmed. People are waiting in line for hours and hours. Speaking to socialism, speaking of lineups, because you're trying to get out of your own bloody country. And it's just a joke. It's just a joke. And these are the things we're learning. I don't know how long it's going to take this country to recover and figure out what's happened. I'm looking at Frank Boucher there. Went to Cuba in Havana a couple of years ago. Rode in an open top double decker around the city. The place is a depressing dump. Yeah, I think that would be the best description I've heard. I haven't been there. Jane's been there. Said it was awesome. I mean, again, you got beautiful beaches, good food, good service. But that's the tourist sector. A lot of historical buildings and things. Great. I went to Guatemala City in the late 80s. Hey, there were still some beautiful things to see downtown. I mean, the outside was all full of sandbags and tanks and machine guns and things, but the city downtown itself was great. You can't look at a whole country based on a certain small part of a city when you visit it. You got to look at the whole. And that's a lot of what happened too. People visited the tourist section and said, oh, the whole country's great. Well, go another couple miles outside of that corridor and see how it is. See how the people on the ground are doing. People point at these, oh, look at this fantastic hospital they have. Yeah, that's for the rich. Yeah, communist or not, there's these communists and there's these communists. And the commoners were in hospitals that had crap smeared on the walls and a terrible, terrible place. Either way, I mean, I think Cuba's improving. Brian saying he'd heard they cleaned it up. I mean, I think they're coming along. Again, a lot of it's based on they're opening up more, though. They're getting a bit more of a market-based economy, letting the public participate a little more. Speaking of delusions, if you want to bring a reality check upon some young socialists. One of my favorites when you see anybody wearing the caricature of that ridiculous Che Guevara, that supposed hero. Well, research Mr. Guevara, because he was anything but. He was grossly anti-gay. He was also very racist. He had some terrible thoughts that he shared on black people. And anybody wearing that man's face on a shirt while they walk around should really not be proud of that. It's an embarrassment. So, just remind them again, let reality come in. Your hero might not be what you thought he was. So let's see, 250 off work for the vaccine mandate. Here's another one with government screwing things up. We legalized pot, which I think was great. That's fine. But of course, the pot business, marijuana wholesalers are complaining at hearings of low profits and high costs. Part of the problem, again, is regulation, guys. It's the government. They brought it in, they legalized it, but they put in so many bloody rules, they can't compete with the same guys who were making basement-grown weed in the past. So they're saying it's a huge cost of becoming a cultivator is made impossible. 11 months in waiting for an application to get through. 11 months. They were losing up to $50,000 to $75,000 a month waiting for their application to come through. Welcome to what the oil field's been enjoying for the last 30 years, potheads. But that's it. When the government gets in on things, they kill it, guys. They kill it every time. You want answers to things? I'll tell you what. The one thing that's never an answer is the government. You need less government. Government's the problem, guys, not the solution. But either way, the pot industry is developing. We'll see. We're seeing so many stores, so many retailers now. I mean, you can't turn around, without seeing one. I don't know how many people are smoking it to keep up with it, but we'll see. Here's a story. I don't know if it's necessarily that pressing or not. It's interesting. I guess some people didn't realize. I'm a surveyor by trade. I was a surveyor for over 20 years. I guess the boundary between Nunavut and the Northwest Territories is 2,400 kilometers long and truly deeply in the middle of nowhere. I don't think there's even a single road crosses that boundary, but it's never actually been surveyed, not in full. But it says only piecemeal surveys were required. They would do it at mine sites and so on, so they know exactly where it is. But who cares? I mean, really, there's not a border to protect. There's not, everything's digital now, GPS. You can find your way to where that boundary should be. I mean, what do you want? A cut line, some more brass benchmarks we don't need anymore, obsolete for an area nobody's going. But it's just kind of an interesting news tidbit, I guess, though, to discover that they never actually did survey that. So, but they're talking about putting one in and doing it. And I don't know. The person testifying saying that to complete it and put it in place, there need to be some sort of constitutional amendment to bring the border in force, and it's not been done. This is according to a surveyor, but maybe he's just gotten in for the contract. I don't think I'd want to survey up there for a few more months. I did my time in the territories. Hey, it's got some great stuff up there, but that just isn't where I was going to want to go. Let's see, BC, decriminalizing. We talked about that. I'm just going through the news here. Guys, we got, that's pretty much it. Today I've got pretty much covered what we need to for the time being. I am going to let you guys go a little early. I appreciate it for all of you tuning in today. Tomorrow, I got a good show coming on. I got Bill Buick coming on. He's of Fairness, Alberta. They got some initiatives going on. They were working on the equalization thing before. And Western Standard columnist Mike Thomas is going to come in, and he's always fun to have a good conversation with. He's got a number of columns we will talk about. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, guys. And again, get on there, westernstandard.news, and sign up for the debate on July 8th. We'll all be there. It'll be an interesting, good time. The Conservative Party of Canada debate at the Petroleum Club in Calgary, July 8th. So thanks for tuning in today, guys, and I'll see you all tomorrow at 11:30 sharp.